Dawn broke over the Burmese mangrove, and where gunfire and screams had echoed through the night, now there were only vultures, cleaning up what the crocodiles had left behind. Nearly 1,000 Japanese soldiers walked into that swamp on Ramree in February 1945. Only 20 came out alive. The question we've been unable to answer for 80 years is this: what really killed those men in the dark? Because when historians looked closely, what they found was even more disturbing than the legend itself. Let's take it step by step, and stay with me, because what sounds like a horror movie began as a very real battle. Ramree Island sits off the coast of Burma, today Myanmar, in the Rakhine region. It covers around 1,350 square kilometers and is separated from the mainland by a strait roughly 150 meters wide on average. A narrow, muddy channel choked with mangrove. Remember that detail because it changes everything in the end. During the Japanese invasion of Burma in early 1942, the island had been captured. 3 years later, the Allies wanted it back. And not on a whim. In January 1945, forces of the Indian 15th Corps landed on Ramree and neighboring Cheduba to establish airfields to supply the mainland campaign. At its core, it was a matter of logistics. They needed those airstrips to strike Japan on solid ground. The battle, also known as Operation Matador, was fought from January 14th to February 22nd, 1945. It was preceded by a brutal pounding. Liberator bombers dropped their loads on Japanese positions marked with smoke before the 26th Indian Division landed on January 21, 1945, and the British battleship HMS Queen Elizabeth and the light cruiser HMS Phoebe fired thousands of artillery shells at the island. The Japanese began to give ground. But this is where the story twists, and it twists toward the strange. The British executed a flanking maneuver. Their troops overran a Japanese position, splitting the enemy force in two and isolating around 1,000 Japanese soldiers. 1,000 men trapped. With the sea on one side, the enemy on the other, and in between, the mangrove. The British sent them a message that the isolated group, the smaller one, should surrender. And here comes the first impossible decision in this story. Because for a Japanese officer in 1945, surrender was not on the table. The Japanese commander, Colonel Kanichi Nagasawa, faced an impossible choice. Surrender was unthinkable, fighting to the last man was suicide, and retreating into the swamp meant a slower, more terrible death. He chose the swamp, and with that order, nearly 1,000 men marched into what many would later call the Green Hell. But what waited for them inside is worse than you imagine. Hold on. Think for a moment about what that place was. Those mangroves were home to a population of saltwater crocodiles. And not just any reptile. The saltwater crocodile, Crocodilus porosus, is the largest living reptile species on the planet. And to make it worse, it's nocturnal and excels at hunting its prey in the dark. Now put 1,000 exhausted, wounded soldiers into that black water at night. That's the scene. The moment they entered that quagmire, the soldiers began falling to disease, dehydration and hunger. Mosquitoes, spiders, venomous snakes and scorpions hidden in the undergrowth claimed victims one by one, and the crocodiles appeared as the Japanese pushed deeper into the swamp. And then came the night that made this case famous, the night of February 19, 1945. The most quoted account, the one that gave rise to the entire legend, comes from one specific man. And it's worth knowing who he was, because he was no ordinary observer. His name was Bruce S. Wright, a lieutenant commander in the Royal Canadian Navy credited with inventing the Frogman units, divers able to spy on the enemy from the water. Wright was there, on one of the boats surrounding the swamp, and what he wrote will make your skin crawl. He recounted that over the following nights, the British troops encircling the swamp could hear scattered rifle shots in the total darkness, broken by the screams of wounded men crushed in the jaws of half-ton saltwater crocodiles. And he finished with an image you can't get out of your head. At dawn, he said, the vultures came to clean up what the crocodiles had left. From that came the figure that raced around the world. It's believed roughly 1,000 Japanese soldiers entered the swamp, and it's claimed that only 20 escaped, with most of the victims devoured by the crocodiles. The story even earned an entry in the Guinness Book of Records as the most fatalities in a crocodile attack, with some 900 to 1,000 deaths. 900 men devoured. the worst animal attack in recorded history. And this is where we ought to close, on a chill. Except the number doesn't add up, and when the experts went to check it, they found something far more uncomfortable. Because there's a fundamental problem. A mangrove cannot host hundreds of crocodiles large enough and hungry enough to devour an entire army in a single night. There's no mention of any crocodile massacre in the official military reports, British or Japanese, and saltwater crocodiles are not known for feeding frenzies on this scale, especially on live human prey. The size of the supposed crocodile population has also been questioned. Modern zoologists and military historians have dismissed the figure of 1,000 deaths by reptile. So, if it wasn't the crocodiles, what killed those men? Here comes the part almost no one tells. In 1998, an investigation into the incident was carried out, and its conclusions point in another direction. It determined that most of the deaths were probably due to gunfire, suicide, drowning, disease, and starvation. Not fangs, bullets, water, hunger, and fever. There are witnesses who confirm it from the inside. According to Burmese villagers who lived through the battle, including some conscripted by the Japanese army, most of the Japanese casualties in the swamp were caused by dehydration and by disease from exposure and the lack of food and clean water. And those horrifying screams the British boats heard, there's an explanation, and it has to do with that narrow channel from the beginning. According to British military records accessed by a National Geographic investigation, in the early hours of February 18, 1945, the Allies discovered a desperate attempt by hundreds of Japanese soldiers to swim across the channel separating Ramree from the Burmese mainland. Hundreds of exhausted men throwing themselves into the water at night to escape. Except for a few strong swimmers, it is doubtful whether any survived the crossing, reads the official British report cited by National Geographic, which estimates that at least 100 Japanese died or drowned that night. There, perhaps, are the real screams in the dark. Not an army of reptiles, but men drowning. The final numbers of the battle are harsh, and they are real. It's estimated there were between 1,200 and 1,500 Japanese soldiers on Ramree when the British landed, and when the battle ended, only 20 Japanese survived and were taken prisoner. The rest fell in combat or perished in the mangrove. So let's return to the question we started with. What killed those men? The honest answer is this. We don't know exactly, and we probably never will. The exact number of men killed by crocodiles remains a mystery, but the fact stands that Japanese combatants were killed by crocodiles while resisting the British troops. Because this is the final twist. It's not that the legend is entirely false, it's that the truth is grayer, slower, and in a way, more terrible. The accounts of survivors and later historians suggest that while crocodile attacks did happen, most of the deaths were caused by starvation, disease, drowning, and combat wounds, and only a small number are directly attributed to crocodiles. It was not a single night of jaws. It was weeks of agony in a swamp that almost no one walked out of. And in that darkness, between the mud and the black water, there is still a number no one has ever been able to pin down. How many screamed for a bullet, how many for the water, and how many for something that waited for them beneath the surface.